Greetings and welcome once again to Justified Nonetheless. I'm Kevin Berger and I apply the principles of polemics and skepticism to atheism and the claims made by atheists. In their debate on the Kalam cosmological argument, Stephen Woodford of Rationality Rules says, as an empiricist, I would say that to concretely know something, we must verify it through the scientific method. To which in his first rebuttal, Cameron Bertuzzi of Capturing Christianity responds, if Stephen is right, then he doesn't actually know he has any private mental states. Thoughts, for example, your thoughts, are private mental events that happen subjectively in your brain. No one else can experience them, observe them, and these cannot be confirmed or verified through anything like the scientific method. Your thoughts are not publicly observable. This exchange, coupled with another, which I'll get to in a few moments, prompted me to consider the concept of non-belief from a different angle. Regarding this idea of thoughts as private mental states, psychologist Dr. J. Moore writes, traditional clinical psychology generally posits mental events that differ from behavioral events. Mental events are not publicly observable, take place in a different dimension from overt behavior, and are the topic of primary concern. Dr. M.E. Hebert, a clinical psychologist, explains, in addition to behaviors that are observed by others in the environment, there are behaviors occurring that others cannot see, hear, and or feel. Behaviors that are only observable by the person experiencing them are often called private events. Private events include behaviors such as thoughts, physical sensations such as heart racing, stiff muscles, and internal physiological changes, pain, temperament. Philosopher Charles Landisman, Ph.D., wrote, one criterion often proposed to distinguish mental from other sorts of events is privacy. To say that an event is private in the life of an individual seems to mean that other individuals cannot perceive it even in principle. Of course, the individual in whose life the event occurs cannot perceive it either, for we do not speak of perceiving our feelings, thoughts, or sensations. If the term perception is used to denote knowledge gained by means of the senses, then an individual cannot perceive his own pains, decisions, or ruminations, because he does not get to know about those things by seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, or smelling. The reason is that by perception we come to know about things and facts that are external to our bodies, whereas private events are internal. It would be misleading to say that there is no connection between private mental events and public behavioral events. The former informs the latter, at least to some degree. Further, while the latter can certainly be observed and independently verified, there may be contention with regard to the former, and that is the problem. If private mental events cannot be observed and are not empirically testable, measurable, and independently verifiable, then the concept of non-belief fails the principle of verifiability and is as unscientific as a claim that fails the principle of falsifiability. Moreover, to accept the claim of non-belief under such conditions while dismissing the claimed existence of a deity is an obvious special pleading. And this is without taking into account the actions of those who express non-belief that constitute evidence of the presence of belief to the contrary. Conversely, even if private mental events are somehow observable, testable, measurable, and independently verifiable, the onus remains on those expressing non-belief to provide the evidence of this asserted distinction, not of a conceptual or linguistic distinction, neither of which is disputed, but of a distinction between the actual mental states. If thoughts and beliefs are subjective, private events that are not empirical, if they cannot be tested, measured, and verified by observers, then how can anyone, including the subject in question, ever know that a particular belief is absent, even if this is the case? It would seem that there are only two possible ways to accomplish this. The first means by which one could know this would be in the case of brain death, since in that case, no beliefs are present at all. The second method of attaining this knowledge would be by virtue of the principle of non-contradiction. If one believes P, one cannot also believe the negation of P and vice versa. Hence, if one believes, for example, that no deity exists, one cannot also believe that at least one deity does exist. Therefore, one can conclusively know that belief in the existence of at least one deity is indeed absent, and vice versa. In his debate with Ben Shapiro regarding whether or not religion is beneficial to society, Alex O'Connor, formerly cosmic skeptic, said the following regarding what he considers the illusion of free will. That's what the evolutionary process, in my view, in my worldview, I should say, has done so well, is provide precisely that illusion. While I am not yet prepared to commit to them, if one does accept the premises that objective morality and free will do not exist, and that these are merely powerful illusions that are the product of the evolutionary process and emergent social constructs, if one begins with the premise that the illusion of free will in particular is so compelling that even when one is fully aware that it does not truly exist, one behaves as though it does anyway, how does one then justify discounting the notion of non-belief to being imaginary? How does one reconcile the former with the potentiality that non-belief is a related falsehood with regard to the objectivity that we want to possess and perceive ourselves as exercising? Is this not as much self-deception as free will, and for the same reasons, no less? This is especially poignant given that we have no empirical evidence of a distinct neurological state of non-belief among self-identifying atheists who express it. No means by which to identify specific beliefs by which to confirm the absence of one. No means by which one could objectively verify that a particular belief is absent, and no independently verifiable way to differentiate between an absence of belief and belief to the contrary. And to reiterate, this is without taking into consideration the reasons to infer the presence of belief to the contrary among those who express non-belief. Perhaps the reason why these impressions are so powerfully compelling is because there is something more to them than material, and it is the idea that they are illusory that is the real illusion. Finally, in the same debate, O'Connor refers to the principles of non-contradiction and the excluded middle, noting that given a proposition P, either it is true or it is not true. It cannot be both, and it cannot be neither. This serves as one of my arguments against non-belief. If one wishes to argue that believing neither in the existence nor the non-existence of a deity isn't a binary proposition, one must first substantiate a genuine mental state that corresponds to an absence of belief, of epistemicism. This has not, never has been, nor ever will be the same thing as agnosticism, which is what things like the courtroom analogy and the gumball analogies demonstrate, and which is not the point of contention. Further, such analogies, conceptualizations, definitions, descriptions, and personal anecdotes don't equate to empirical evidence. I'm sorry, but saying I am the expert of my own mind carries as much weight as someone's stories of being abducted by aliens, life after death experiences, or encounters with the divine. That is to say, none. Hence, the concept of non-belief is irreconcilable with empiricism. With all of that in mind, I'll remind you once again, just because your beliefs aren't necessarily true, they should be justified nonetheless.